your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes every. You turn my morning into dancing. 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 'Cause your love changes everything. Your love changes everything. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. You turn my morning into dancing. 'Cause your love changes everything. Your love changes everything. Oh, there's something about your love. Something about your love changes everything in my body. Oh, something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. It changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. It changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. Changes everything. Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything. You turn my morning into dancing. 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 Something about your love. Something about your love changes everything.
Yo! Hey, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. These are my favorites. We're Living Sent, talking about Living Sent. I love talking about this subject. So today I was thinking, I was at the gym this morning, and I was thinking about, I think a lot of stuff. Yeah. So I was thinking about conversations and thinking about how in tough conversations, there's always this kind of wrestle, right? And I think all of us can relate to this. Like when something pops in your head and you're like, do I say that? Or should I say that? I don't know, right? And so kind of that's what we're going to be talking about today. But before that, I'm gonna say hi to some folks. So we got Vivian Davis. Good morning. We got Diane. Oh my goodness, sorry, Dr. Colleen. That's what I meant to say. Chuck B. Good morning, sir. Pastor Tom out there on X. Ken Gooch and Dave Donnelly. I'll pull Pastor Tom. Dave, meet Pastor Tom. Pastor Tom, meet Dave. Connie. Good morning to you as well. And Karen Thompson. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy Friday again. And Bert Reggiani is out there. Good morning, sir. All right. Love you guys. So thinking through like conversations, right? Like we all have these situations, these moments where we're having conversations, and sometimes so it could be conversations with strangers, it could be conversations that we're having, with family members, whoever, right? Thinking about like a stranger, right? Like you having this conversation with the guy at the grocery store, and all of a sudden like something pops in your head, it's kind of off the wall. You're like, dude, do I say that? Dude, should I say that? And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But also, I think more frequently it happens like in tough conversations, right? Like I'm Teresa. Good morning. I'm in this tough conversation, and like something pops in my head that I know there's room for offense. There's room like this. It's like one of those heavy hitters, right? Like. I should just I should shake my head and say yes and agree and end the conversation, right? But then something pops in your head and you're like, oh man, I might have to challenge what they just said, right? If we ever experience that, show your hands, right? Put the hand emoji in the text. But so I'm thinking about, I was thinking about this morning, and I thought it would be cool today, as living sent. I would take you on a journey into Aaron's psyche, right? Like let you in on like what's happening in my brain, and for two things really. So one, you'll understand me a little bit more, but also I think this could encourage you and inspire you in those conversations as well. So. Dr. Colleen putting the hand up. Okay. So diving into my psyche is in situations like that, right? Pertaining to like that topic, what it boils down to is I'm convinced of two things, right? And Chuck, all right, he's in there too. Okay. So I'm convinced. I'm like full heart, 100%, like full heart. It's just convinced of these two things. And the number one thing that I'm convinced about is that at some point in my life, right, like through the span of my life, my existence, I'm convinced that the God of the universe has spoken to me directly. Right, not audibly, but in my heart, in my head, like I've heard the voice of God. I'm convinced, I'm more convinced that I've heard from God than I am that Chuck is still watching this stream. You know what I mean? I'm convinced. I know for sure that God has spoken to me, and not on one occasion, but on multiple occasions. Right? I'm convinced of that. 100% convinced of that. Right? The other thing that I'm convinced about is that I'm convinced that God speaks to me more than I hear him. Right? Like I'm convinced that I am still learning to hear the voice of the Lord, right? That I don't always understand it, that I don't always pick up on it, that God speaks sometimes and that I completely just miss it, or I ignore it, I write it off. I'm convinced that I have missed clear direction from the Lord on multiple occasions, that I more than likely I miss his voice than I hear his voice, right? I'm convinced of it. I'm 100% convinced of those two things, right? And so in conversations like this, or in conversations like that, where it could be either a tough conversation, or it can be just a conversation with a random stranger, or like we could be at prayer and then something crazy pops in my head, right? And I'm convinced of these two things. What happens is, instead of me wrestling like, oh, I can't say it, I gotta say it, I can't say it, I gotta say it. It's like, man, this could be God. I'm not saying it is God. I'm not saying I'm some special person, but like God has spoken to me. He has spoken to me like this, and this could be Him. And do I want to? Am I going to be willing to listen to the voice of God and step out and say, hey, I know this sounds crazy. I know this is off the wall, but this is what popped in my head, right? I'm learning to hear the voice of the Lord, and I know I'm going to miss it a bunch. But can you help me just honor God by just letting me speak, what popped in my head, and you can make sense of it later. I gotta say it. I gotta say what pops in my head. I gotta speak on those things. And so if I'm in a conversation and like you're saying something and something pops in my head that it kind of challenged that thought or something like that, I might wrestle with how I have to say it, but I gotta say it. It's gotta come out, and it's just me trying to honor the voice of the Lord, and that could be speaking, right? He could be trying to get something released into the room, and He might be trying to use me to do it. And so that's how I handle those situations, and that's why honesty, right, is like this huge thing. Like, I want to be honest. I want to speak whenever these things pop in my head. And so if I'm at the grocery store and I somebody says something, and all of a sudden I see this bridge to the gospel, like, oh, I gotta say something. I gotta do it. And I know we were just talking about football, but you gotta understand, like if you get a first down and just somehow tie it into Christ, if it pops in my head, if this corny thing pops in my head that relates football to Jesus, it's coming out, right? Because maybe that's the ticket. Maybe that is what this person in front of me actually needs. And God knows his heart way more than me. He loves the person that's in front of me way more than I could ever, that I have capacity to do. And so if I can just give God a little yes and say, you know what, God, this could be you, right? I'm going to step out in faith. I'm going to speak what you spoke to me, or what I think you might be speaking to me. And then two things happen. One, you grow, right? The more you do this, the more you start to learn his voice, and you're like, oh, that wasn't it. all right. I'm fine tuning it. I'm getting it down. I'm getting it closer. And then the other thing, I feel like, man, there's when you do get it right, the person you get to experience this person experiencing the love of the Father. Right, like that you get to experience. We've all been here where you're in church or somebody says a word to you, and in that moment you like, man, this person isn't speaking to me, this pastor isn't speaking to me, like this is the Lord, like it's resonating, like you have this internal tuning fork in you, and then all of a sudden this same frequency is outside, and it's just like, it's harmony, we've all been there, right? And that's when these moments happen, is when people are not afraid to step out and say, hey, listen, I'm learning to hear the voice of the Lord, right? And so I'm probably going to miss it here, but I have to honor. The only way to learn is to actually step out, and so I got to share what's on my heart. And so I hope this was an encouragement to you. It's just kind of where my head took me to today, and so. Love you guys. I hope you have an amazing day. And in conversations like that, so let me challenge you with this. I challenge you to scan the scope of your life, right? Go back and find moments where you are 100% convinced that God has spoken to you in the past. And if God has spoken to you in the past, then you have to know that he's doing it. He's still doing it, right? And so convince yourself, show yourself remember those moments where you're convinced that you heard the voice of the Lord, and it helps us live sent. I hope this was an encouragement to you, y'all. Hey, you got a yes from Pastor Tom. Amen. Thank you. All right, love ya. We'll be here. I think Matt Ryan has prayer at 9, so make sure you tune into that. See you later. Peace.